Well, from cancer to cold sores, there are a host of conditions that are often said to be brought on by stress. But can the body's reaction to threatening situations really cause illness? Or is it just a convenient way for your doctor to explain the unexplainable? In fact, some forms of stress are necessary for the body, and the stress response is highly individual. Now, scientists in Germany have developed an objective way of measuring the way people react or overreact to a challenge.
Running a successful restaurant is a dream for many. Peter Fraas is living that dream. Customers enjoy relaxing at his place. He's his own boss and employs 50 others. His restaurant is one of the best known in Karlsruhe, and business is booming.
I love what I do. You can really do your own thing here. And we've got a really big business. Sometimes it's like a big playground. And it's really varied, so you never get bored.
Peter Fraas is always busy, and despite a minor stroke, he says he feels well. So, does a satisfying job keep you fit? Does the body automatically stay healthy when a person is fulfilled? We wanted to find out, so we're spending a day monitoring how Peter Fraas really is doing. This is Stefan Hai from the University of Karlsruhe. He's conducting research into ways of measuring stress, independently of whether a person actually feels stressed out or not. Hai has developed a special sensor for gathering and storing key data. Peter Fraas must wear the device for 24 hours. That's more than enough time to see if he's relaxed or stressed out.
All-day monitoring is important because it allows comparison between data gathered during the day and what comes in at night. From that, we can conclude whether the stress is acute or chronic.
You can't really evaluate it yourself. If I can read actual data about the kind of stress I'm subjected to, then I can respond to it better.
Stefan Hai and his team are working on ways of providing anyone with up-to-the-minute reliable data, for example on heart rate change, an important indicator of stress. The chest sensor picks up the data and transmits it to the wearer's mobile phone. It detects stress levels. So, for example, if the pulse gets too high, even though a person is stationary, the phone will emit a warning. Peter Fraas will wear the sensor for 24 hours and only get the results the next day.
Ich habe eine Frage, ich brauche nur die Preise von den, ich brauche, Moment einmal, bleiben Sie mal dran, ich brauche 100 Kilo Schweinelachse.
Fraas has to order food for the entire week. It's a routine job, but it's fraught with important decisions.
Relatively low figures were reached for these stress parameters. Low values stand for pressure and a bit of tension. At 110 beats a minute, the heart rate is relatively high, even though it's the beginning of the day. That means the day starts at full speed.
Being your own boss usually makes for a satisfied worker. However, the need to maintain an overview, plus continual time pressure, can trigger stress.
I get to work at 9. The second cook should already be there and he's not. And I've got to do the shopping, take deliveries. And then I still have to work in the kitchen. But that's the way it is when you have a business. You've got to be ready for everything.
While buying in food, he finds out a huge group is coming in for an evening meal, so he has to react right away. The effect of all that on his body? A pulse of 110 beats per minute all morning. A normal pulse is usually around 80. But Fraas barely notices. He's in his element, and he thinks things are going smoothly. The problem is that the body doesn't differentiate whether a person deals with the stress positively or not.
Tension triggers specific physical reactions. Blood pressure and pulse rise, and it doesn't really matter if the person's having fun doing what's making them ill. The pressure on the body has the same effect.
The only way to deal with persistent stress is to take a break. It's 12:30, finally time for lunch and some relaxation. But the break brings only a small improvement in Fras's recovery parameters. Soon he's running at full steam again.
As soon as lunch is over, his heart rate climbs again fairly rapidly.
And that's largely thanks to a difficult meeting with an employee. The confrontation takes Fras's pulse up to the day's high of nearly 130. It's a classic sign of psychological stress. The celebration dinner for the surprise guests comes on the heels of a day in the pressure cooker. That means overtime. But it's no problem for Fras, who's a typical workaholic and barely notices the strain. After 14 hours on the job, he even feels relatively relaxed.
Things were calmer somehow today. I can't imagine my pulse changed a lot. Maybe if I saw a nice-looking woman, my pulse will have gone up. But I'd say it's more measured now.
Not quite. At 10:30 p.m., Fras and his son finally stop working and try to switch off.
When he got home, there was actually a drop in his pulse, but it didn't continue while he was sleeping. His heart rate went up again, reducing his recovery parameters. That's atypical.
The result is a shock. Fras can't even rest when he's sleeping. That's a clear sign of pathological constant stress. The data is unequivocal. The lines plotted here shows Fras hardly ever relaxes. Normal data would look like this.
It's psychological. I'm not convinced that it's physical stress. It's my emotions. That means I've got to do far more delegating. And I'm going to lengthen the recovery phases that I have. I'm going to find out where I can go and relax and what does me the most good personally.
The data alone can't reduce Fras's stress level, but it's still a crucial message that something has to change.
Here to tell us more about managing stress in everyday life is Professor Isabella Heuser. She's a psychiatrist at the Charité Hospital here in Berlin. Thank you so much for joining us here in the studio. Now, this restaurant owner in the report was really stressed, but he didn't even notice it himself. How can he have not noticed it when it's so risky for him?
Well, that's a pretty regular occurrence that people subjectively don't notice that they are stressed out, actually, whereas the objective data tell us something else.
Is there any definitive proof out there that, stress really is behind any one particular illness?
Oh, yes. I think that there is no doubt that if you're very stressed and if you are living under chronic stressful conditions, if you have everyday stress like daily hassles, then you have a much higher risk to develop depression, severe depression, or a cardiovascular disorder like heart attack or strokes.
So that commute into work or whatever it might be that happens every other day actually could lead to one of these diseases or problems.
And that has been shown in multiple studies.
Do you distinguish between physiological and psychological stress?
No, we don't do that because psychological stress always translates, of course, into physiological or metabolic changes. So, for example, if you experience what you call psychological stress, then your body reacts to that. There's adrenaline, there's cortisol that's being secreted. Sleep is going to be disturbed by that. The blood pressure rises, pulse rises. So there's a lot of bodily changes going on when you have psychological stress.
But for example, these effects or these hormones, these stress hormones, we can't actually live without them either.
No, we can't, and we are not supposed to actually, because it gives us drive, it gives us the energy, it gives us the motivation to go on. But there's always the question, how long do you want to go on? You have to have periods of relaxation. That is very important, that you relax and give your body a chance to recuperate, if you will.
How do you know then when this stress is enough at this point? How do you regulate that?
Well, you can't really do that, but or it's not so easy. But you should be very aware of the fact that there is a sign. If you are a sign telling you that there might be a problem with chronic stressful conditions that you are living in, if you have difficulties falling asleep or sleeping through the night, or if you can only sleep at night, fall asleep at night when you have alcohol, which is not recommended actually. Okay. So these are subtle signs that you might be living in stressful conditions.
Can the body actually adapt to a high level of stress and then become immune to it somehow?
No, it can't.
Definitely
no,
not.
Definitely not.
How about breaking down the stress in the body then? Apart from getting a good night's sleep, relaxation, is there any other advice or tips out there for people who are suffering from severe stress?
Yes, there's another tip that you should follow. Maybe do mild physical activity, you know, nothing stressful. Okay. Yeah, don't go into competitions or anything, but just have a nice walk with somebody you like.
Isabella Heuser, thank you so much for joining us here in studio today.
You're welcome.